Good afternoon, and thank you for tuning into our organization presentation featuring Arrive Alive. My name is Emily Joseph, and I work with the Careers, Co-Curricular, and Community Engagement Department. Alongside me is my manager, Ms. Katia Lewis, and my colleague, Ms. Nyla Romano. Put on your seatbelts and let's stay ahead with our new driver safety workshop. Today's session will cover basic vehicle inspection, journey management, impaired distracted driving, and the demerit point system. As a bonus point, you would gain some insight into volunteering at Arrive Alive. Joining us today is Ms. Esther Griffith, Arrive Alive's Operation Manager Facilitator. Our presenter, Mr. Jerome Skinner, in 2009, had a passion for helping others and a keen interest in road safety, which led him to volunteer with Arrive Alive in his free time help the roads of Trinidad, to help make the roads of Trinidad and Tobago safer. He is now a manager at Arrive Alive and holds a professional certificate in road safety in the Caribbean region from the Inter-American Development Bank. The experience he has gained from participation at conferences, workshops, symposiums hosted by regional and international experts, such as DUE, the International Road Federation, and the Global Alliance of NGOs for Road Safety, have helped him play a key role in educating the public on safe road practices, supporting those families affected by vehicular crashes, and advocating for the rights of all road users. Guys, help me in welcoming Mr. Jerome Skinner.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. I'm still seeing some people trickling in. We have an information-filled session carded for today. So without further ado, I just want to jump straight into it. So let me just share my screen. We're going to talk today about several different things that would affect you as a new driver. So our agenda, we'll start with an introduction. So I'll let you know a little bit more about Arrive Alive. And then we are going to look at driving in the order in which we will actually drive, right? The first thing we have to do is get behind the wheel. So we need to know the vehicle, understand how the vehicle works. How do we make sure our vehicle is safe? We're going to look at the roads themselves. How do we make sure our road is safe? And if the road is not safe, how do we assess that risk? We're going to look at speed and journey management. We're going to look at alcohol as well. And lastly, we're going to cover some information, some important information, and hopefully dispel some misinformation that is in the public domain about the demerit point system. So firstly, who is Arrive Alive? Some of you all may have seen our logo somewhere, this big logo that you see all over the place. Sometimes you hear about Arrive Alive in the media. Who is Arrive Alive? This is our mission and vision statements I have on the screen. All our mission really speaks about, or what we're really concerned about at Arrive Alive is responsibility and accountability, right? When it comes to our roads, we want everyone to be responsible. And if you are not being responsible, you need to be held accountable. So for the typical driver, we have a responsibility as drivers that includes making sure we don't break traffic lights. That's a responsibility. Or not driving on the shoulder. That is our responsibility. We know what we're supposed to do and what we're not supposed to do as drivers, right? Now, what we're supposed to do and what we actually do as drivers don't always align. So in those instances, we expect some sort of accountability to come into play. Yeah, so we'll talk about the demerit point system a little later, but that is one form of accountability, right? To ensure that persons do the right thing. right? We believe that if everyone is responsible and everyone is accountable when it comes to our roads, we will achieve our vision of keeping families together with zero injuries and zero fatalities. Now, I have zero, very, very large there, but that's actually not the most important part of that statement. For us, the most important part of that statement is keeping families together, because we see firsthand when we lend support to families who have lost loved ones because of a car crash, we see just how traumatic it can be. Knowing that someone was here today, they literally just went to go to the grocery, or they just stepped out for a little bit and then they never make it back home. Yeah, that type of trauma we don't believe anyone should have to face. And the thing about car crashes is that it is 100% avoidable. It is preventable. Yeah, so that is the stance that we take. This video here is actually from Barbados. And you'll see a cyclist coming up from the bottom of your screen. This cyclist was actually a former West Indies fast bowler, Mr. Ezra Mosley. Right? Might have been a bit before some of your time. Now, in that crash, Mr. Mosley was killed. And I must apologize for showing such a graphic scene so early on, but I feel like it's important for us to really understand how severe a little mistake on the road can be. Now, Mr. Mosley was killed in that crash, but I want us to focus on the driver of that black vehicle. The driver of that black vehicle, at the time of the crash, was 17 years old. Just got his driver's license. Quite frankly, he probably just borrowed his parents' car. At that point in time, just before he made that turn, he was probably so happy and excited, right? They have some freedom. You finally have the ability to bounce that starter and drive and go about your own business. But in literally a split second, right? Literally just one bad decision. Because of that one bad decision, he now has taken a life. And it's one thing if you get into a crash and you injure yourself. It's one thing if you get into a crash and you damage your car, you write off the car. But it's a completely different situation if you get into a crash and you kill someone else. You know, that's a very, very heavy burden to bear. Just imagine at 17 years old, that is the burden he now has to bear, right? And I really don't want any of you to have to bear that type of burden. Yeah, so as we go through this workshop today, I want us to keep that in mind. Recognize that it's not only us as drivers only focusing on what we need to do, but we have to be mindful of all those around us that also use the roads. Yeah, when you all were learning to drive, you all may have been told you can't drive for yourself, you have to drive for others, right? Those others aren't only other drivers, but they are all the other people who use the roads. The drivers, cyclists, motorcyclists. What about pedestrians, right? They all have a right to use the roads, and as such, as drivers, we have to be mindful of that. Right here in Trinidad and Tobago, we see this happening a lot, right? People make mistakes on the road, and as a result, it costs lives. Yeah. So the first thing we need to look at is the vehicles themselves. What about our vehicles that makes the vehicles safe, right? I have two vehicles on the screen. The one on top is Datsun 120Y, right? As some young people will tell me that is the original Wetman, right? Before there was a Tita, there was the Datsun 120Y, right? Everybody's grandfather at some point in time had a Datsun 120Y. Now, when they were making those 120Ys, if I was to buy that vehicle brand new out of Neil and Massey, brand new out of the showroom, there are a few things that that vehicle will not have. For example, those vehicles when they were bought didn't come with seatbelts. Seatbelts were not standard. If I wanted seatbelts in the car, I had to pay extra for it, right? They didn't have things like ABS. For those of you who don't know, ABS is a type of enhanced braking system in your vehicle. It's a type of emergency braking system. When the ABS is engaged, when you slam on the brakes, it helps the vehicle stop in a shorter distance, right? Things like crumple zones. So you might hear people talk about how new vehicles are soft, right? They're designed to mash up. Well, they kind of are, right? It's actually part of the safety design that those vehicles will crumple. Yeah, they crumple so that the crumpling effect absorbs the force of that impact. Yeah, it absorbs the force of that impact. The older vehicles didn't have that technology. Yeah. As car manufacturers have improved on the technology, cars are now designed to be safer. A perfect example of that, something that you see all the time. When you look at TV or any ad that you see for any motor vehicle, they always talk about how safe the vehicles are. And it doesn't matter the make or the model. It could be Audi, it could be BMW, it could be Nissan, it could be Honda. They all talk about how safe the vehicles are, right? The car manufacturers are now pushing that as part of their marketing strategy. Cars are being designed to be more safe. So it's important for you as a driver to be mindful of those safety features in your vehicle and utilize them. Yeah, we have seat belts as a safety feature. That's a standard safety feature in cars now. So much so that you have seat belts in the back seat. But how many of us actually use those safety features? Yeah. What about checking to make sure our vehicle is in good working order? Do we know how to check to make sure our vehicle is in good working order? Now, the thing is, some people think, I'm not mechanically inclined. I'm not a mechanic, so I don't know anything about checking no car. It doesn't work like that. You don't need to be a mechanic, right? You need to do basic checks, right? And a basic check is as simple as the acronym I have on top here, power, right? We'll start with P for petrol or fuel. O for oil. If your vehicle doesn't have oil, you run the risk of certain mechanical components of the vehicle not getting enough lubrication and you can run into some serious trouble. I have W for water. Now, modern vehicles, they tell you to use coolant, right? But in the case of an emergency, you can use water. The electrical, when I talk about electrical, what I'm talking about is really the lights, right? And rubber, your tires. Do we check our tires to make sure that they're working? Now, as I'm going through this session, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. At the end of the session, we will go through the chat and we answer all questions. So again, when we're looking at petrol or fuel, do you have enough fuel for your journey? Do you know where the gas stations are? Trust and believe, one thing that you do not want to happen to you as a driver is to run out of gas. Yeah? Like I mentioned before about the oil. The oil serves to lubricate the different moving parts of the vehicle, right? And you have different types of oil, right? You have engine oil, you have transmission fluid, you have brake fluid. Get familiar with your vehicle, recognize where these different fluids go, and know how to check it. In most instances, you check your vehicle's oil, the engine oil, when the engine is off, but the engine is warm, right? And there's an indicator that you can check to determine if you have enough oil or not, right? Coolant is important, that water, right? If your car doesn't have enough coolant in it, if it doesn't have that water running through the system, your vehicle will overheat. And again, you don't want to break down on the side of the road. These are things that can be avoided. right? Electrical, checking your lights, right? How often have you been on the roads, especially at night, and you see someone driving and you only seen one headlight, right? Only seen one headlight. Or what about brake lights? Recognize that if your brake lights are not working, the car behind you may not realize that you're trying to stop, right? You run the risk of being rear-ended. So making sure your brake lights are working is very important. Now, a question I get all the time is, how do I check my brake lights? If I'm in the car, stepping on the brakes, how am I supposed to check my brake lights? It's real simple. If you park somewhere and there's anything behind you, you should see the reflection of the lights onto that object, whether it be a wall, a post, a bin, what have you, right? If you don't have anything like that, see if you get someone to help you. Is not anything more than asking someone to just check and see if your brake lights are coming on, right? And rubber, those tires, we underestimate just how serious those tires are. We have to be able to check our tires. And when we say checking the tires, we're not only looking at tire pressure. Tire pressure is important, but it's not only tire pressure. Checking for tread depth. Tread depth is important. If you check on the treads of your tire, you will see some little ridges. Yeah, some little ridges that run perpendicular to the tread itself. Those ridges give you an indicator of when you need to change your tire. Yeah, when you're checking your tires, you're also looking for any wear and tear, uneven wear and tear. If you have your tires wearing unevenly, is an indication that you might have some suspension issues, right? So it's an indication that you may have other issues that, if not treated, can cost you a lot of money, right? As much as I'm talking about tire pressure, do you know what the correct tire pressure should be for your vehicle, right? Most cars, especially if it's a vehicle that has not been repainted, there's usually a little sign on the inside of the driver's side door. Yeah, there's a little sticker. If you take your time and you read that sticker, it tells you what PSI your tires should be inflated to, right? And in most vehicles, you have a slightly different PSI for the front and than to the back, right? But make sure you check that first before you just go and put tire pressure, because having your tires overinflated or having them underinflated can compromise how you can maneuver that vehicle. So let's see who is paying attention. What does the acronym POWER mean? I'm gonna ask you all to just put that answer in the chat, please. What does the acronym POWER mean? When we're talking about checking our vehicles, what does the acronym POWER mean? Nice, I'm seeing a couple answers coming in. Nice. So when we're talking about power, we're talking about how we're checking our vehicle. It's an easy way to remember, right? It's an easy way to remember. Now, depending on how much driving you may do, you might need to check your vehicle every day. Some people might check it once a week, depending on how much driving they may do, the number of kilometers they cover on a daily basis, right? Either way, using power helps you remember what you need to check, right? Power stands for petrol or fuel, oil, water, or coolant. E for electrical and R for rubber. Check those tires. As a matter of fact, I want to add a little something extra. On as much as we're talking rubber, we're in rainy season. So you need to check your windshield wipers as well, right? Right? You need to check your windshield wipers as well. There's nothing worse than having to drive through a storm, driving through bucket or drop rain, as we see in Trinidad and Tobago, and the windshield wipers aren't doing anything to get rid of that water from the windscreen. Yeah. What about knowing the road? So if we know our vehicles, we're familiar with our vehicles, we check our vehicles and make sure that they're roadworthy. What about the roads? Right? I've know some people might say the roads aren't vehicle worthy, right? But regardless, those are the roads that we have to drive on. So how do we assess risks on the roads? Well, I'll give you a little hint. The roads talk to us. The roads communicate to us. There's information that is communicated to us as drivers whenever we get on the roads. Some of those bits of information may come in the form of road signs. Let's look at a few other ways in which information is shared with us when we're on the roads. So we could look at the physical infrastructure, right? Let's look at the physical infrastructure of the road. Now, for all intents and purposes, when roads are built, when they're designed, they should be made in such a way that they're safe and accessible for all road users. Unfortunately, in Trinidad and Tobago, our roads are not at that standard as yet. We know for a fact our roads are built for cars, but we know that there are places where there aren't any pavements, or there may be places where there isn't an easy place for persons to cross the roads, right? We definitely don't have cycle lanes in Trinidad and Tobago. So then it means that our roads are not accessible for all road users. Now, what does that mean for me as a driver? It means that when I'm on a road and there's no pavement on either side, without me seeing anyone else on the road, I automatically know that if there are pedestrians, they have no choice but to walk in the road. So as a driver, I automatically need to shift the way in which I drive to expect that there may be pedestrians on the road. Yeah? We need to adjust the way in which we think. And again, as simple as that is, I didn't have a physical road sign to tell me that. I'm just assessing the infrastructure around me. I'm looking at the infrastructure, and the infrastructure is giving me information. Yeah? For that matter, when you look at speed limit signs, did you know that speed limit signs or speed limits are set by traffic engineers? And those traffic engineers use a very complex formula, right? A complicated piece of physics and math. And I'm saying complicated because I'm not an engineer, right? So I don't understand the math. And I do understand the idea behind the physics, but I don't understand the math. But even though I'm not an engineer, I can do my own assessment of a road to determine if I can safely drive at a high speed. And I use 4 S's to determine or to assess that road in that way, right? I can look at the size of the road, the size of the road, the shape of the road, the surface of the road, and the shoulder. Those 4 S's give me information as to whether I can drive at a high rate of speed or not. Let's use, for example, let's compare the highway to the main roads. When you compare the size of the road or the size of the lanes, even, the highways are much larger than the main roads. Yeah, the highways are much larger than the main roads. So because of that, I feel more comfortable driving at a high rate of speed on the highway than on the main roads, right? Because the main road is narrow, I have to drive slower to make sure that I don't go too far beyond my lanes. What about the shape of the road? The highways tend to be very flat. Or if it's not flat, it slopes to one side or the other. That slope actually helps you make a turn. So think about places like El Socorro on the highway, Trin City, right? Around Bolio Avenue, think Claxton Bay. right? All those areas, the road slopes to one side to allow vehicles to travel at a higher rate of speed. On the main roads, however, you don't have that slope. On the main roads, it's almost like a hump, where the middle of the road is the highest point. Now we know that the main roads are shaped like that for drainage. Unfortunately, it also means, because it's shaped like that for drainage, it means that if I am making a right turn, I may not get as much traction because of the road being sloped to the left. What about the surface? The surface of the road makes a difference. Yeah, when we start driving, when you have a nice, freshly paved stretch of road, right? Road is nice and smooth. You feel comfortable driving at a high rate of speed. But if the road is rough, yeah, automatically, without thinking, your instinct is to slow down. Yeah, the surface of the road plays a role in how fast you drive. And what about the shoulder? Now, the shoulder is a bit tricky because as drivers, we would have learned the shoulder is to be used in case of an emergency. It is a safe refuge for drivers to pull aside in case of an emergency. The catch with that is, as drivers, if you're driving on the highway and we see that shoulder, in the back of our minds, we start thinking, nobody should stop. Yeah? Nobody should stop because there's a shoulder. So if someone needs to stop, they should pull aside. But if you've ever had that experience, and I hope that it does not happen to you anytime soon, if someone slams on their brakes when you're heading on that highway, you have a moment of panic, right? Because you're not expecting anyone to stop. So when you see a shoulder, you recognize that there's somewhere for persons to pull aside if there's an emergency. So you drive with the expectation that no one's going to stop in front of you. On the main roads, however, is a horse of a completely different color. On the main roads, you drive with the expectation that people are going to stop. Yeah, whether it be a maxi or a taxi, whether it be a bus, whether it be a goods vehicle stopping to make deliveries, whether it be someone pulling aside to buy something from the grocery, what have you. We always expect people to stop on the main roads. So you drive differently, recognizing that there is no shoulder for them to stop. Yeah, so those 4 S's play a role when it comes to the way in which we drive and how fast we drive. Yeah, so keep that in mind. We'll come back to that in a second. So I didn't actually give you all these answers just yet, but I'm going to ask anyway. When you're approaching a roundabout, which vehicle has the right of way? When using a roundabout, which vehicle has the right of way? Is it A, the vehicle leaving the roundabout? Is it B, the vehicle on the left? Is it C, the vehicle coming from the right that has already entered the roundabout? Or is it D, the vehicle driving past the roundabout? Please put your answers in the chat. Which vehicle has a right of way when using a roundabout? Oh, wait, did I mention that we have prizes? We have prizes for those of you who answer correctly. Yeah, so let's see who's the first person to answer correctly. Which vehicle has the right of way when using a roundabout? Now, I threw this question in here on purpose because when you go to do your driving test, you do regulations, you do a yard test, you do a road test. There's actually no information about roundabouts throughout that entire process. So you've been given a driver's permit after you've done a test at less than 40 kilometers per hour. And when you get your driver's permit, now you can drive up to 100 kilometers per hour on the highway. And if you encounter a roundabout, well, you'll figure it out. Right? So let's see how many people have figured it out. So for those of you who answered C, you are absolutely correct. When you're approaching a roundabout, the vehicle that is coming from your right, that has already entered the roundabout, that vehicle has right of way. And just in case you were uncertain, I can show you this little simulation of a roundabout. Now we've been seeing more and more roundabouts popping up on the roads of Trinidad and Tobago, and actually is a very good road safety measure, right? When we approach roundabouts, we have to slow down. The type of collision and the risk of collision significantly decreases, and the type of collision has a lower likelihood of fatality. So if you follow this yellow vehicle coming from the left, and as a matter of fact, if you look at all those vehicles, you'll notice that all those drivers are speaking to each other. They're all communicated. Yes, those yellow flashing dots represent indicators, and that is how we as drivers communicate with each other. By using our indicators, we tell other drivers around us what we intend to do. So yes, I know we see lots of bad habits on the roads of Trinidad and Tobago, but it needs to stop somewhere. So if you look at that yellow vehicle coming from the left of the screen, you'll realize they put on their right indicator to tell the other drivers around them that their intention is to go all the way around the roundabout. And just before it makes the third exit, he puts on his left indicator to tell drivers around him that his intention is to get off of the roundabout. You all see that? Now, I know it is something that you all may have never heard about before, much less have even been taught, but it's a simple concept. The concept is simply to communicate your intention, communicate with other drivers what you intend to do. Now, I've been using my indicators on roundabouts for a number of years. And even though I know in Trinidad and Tobago, drivers don't use their indicators on roundabouts, drivers seem to understand what I'm trying to do. And if they don't understand what I'm trying to do, they usually give me enough space to complete my maneuver. Yeah? It's an exercise in courtesy, consideration, and a little bit of common sense. What about lane markings? Do lane markings give us information on the roads? As drivers, we would have learned when we were doing our driving practice, when we were doing our driving test on the roads, we were told to keep left unless overtaken. We were told you have to stay within the lines. Yes? If we have a single solid line, what does that mean? It means do not cross. Think about it. If you see a single solid line on the road, it means do not cross. Sometimes you see a double solid line, and it means the same thing, do not cross. But what about when we see a single broken line? It means the same thing, almost. It means do not cross unless it is safe to do so. Think about how people drive on the highways. Once there are lane markings, as drivers, we have a tendency to stay in between our lanes, right? Stay in between those lines. Yeah, so the lane markings give you information as well. If you ever pay attention in the areas, I'll give you a good example. That roundabout by Arthur Lockjack in Mount Hope. If you ever pay attention to that roundabout, you'd notice that as you're approaching that roundabout, the lines give you a little wave. It bends a little bit. Just about 100 meters, maybe, from the roundabout. What that does is it tricks you as a driver into slowing down. Because if you actually look at the road itself, the road is straight, but the lines give you a kind of wave, right? It's actually designed that way to get you as a driver to slow down. Because think about it, in areas where you cannot see very far ahead, especially at night where it's a little darker, you need those lane markings to give you guidance, to tell you what direction the road is going. Yeah? What about using our lane markings? Or sorry, what about when you learned how to drive and you were taught to keep left unless overtaking? Somewhere along the way, we see drivers develop bad habits. You see drivers driving in that right lane, right? And some of you all may have heard people say it. They're driving in the fast lane. So let me correct that one time. In Trinidad and Tobago, we do not have a fast lane. I'll repeat. In Trinidad and Tobago, we do not have a fast lane. In Trinidad and Tobago, we have an overtaking lane. Yeah, we have a lane that is to be used for overtaking only. So if you ever travel along the Solomon Hochoy Highway in particular, there are several road signs that tell you keep left unless overtaking. Yeah? And if you need to overtake, what do? The first thing you do is you check your mirrors. Check to see, make sure it's safe. Put on your indicator, your right indicator. Check your mirrors again. Make sure it is safe before switching lanes. Once you switch lanes, you speed up. You pass the vehicle you're attempting to overtake, and then you put on your left indicator. Check your mirrors again. Make sure it's safe before you complete the maneuver. Remembering to turn off your indicator when you have completed the maneuver. How else do we get information on the roads? Road signs. Now, there are tons of road signs. And as new drivers, you all should all be familiar with these road signs because everyone should have done regulations. Now, again, when Trinidad and Tobago in 2023, most places where I see road signs, there are captions below that give you information that tells you what the road sign means. But please, please, please get familiar with your road signs in the event that you do not see a caption. Yeah? Know what the signs mean. Right? If I'm driving somewhere and there's a dangerous double bend, for example, that sign gives me information to help me adjust my driving to suit. If there's a dangerous double bend ahead, it means I need to slow down so that I can negotiate the turn safely. What about signs that give you other information? I like to use this one as an example. Along the Eastern Main Road between St. Joseph and Mount Lambert, there's a special traffic arrangement. It's meant to alleviate traffic. And it says that between 5 a.m. and 2 p.m., traffic can use the middle lane to travel westbound. And between 2 p.m. to 9 p.m., traffic can use the middle lane to travel eastbound. The only exceptions would be if you need to make a right turn. If you need to make a right turn, you can use the middle lane at an intersection. I cannot tell you how many people see these signs and don't understand what it means. I can tell you for a fact, even more people don't even notice the signs there. But that is very, very crucial information. Yeah, that is crucial information for a driver to know, especially if you're not from the area, if you're not familiar with the area. Right? I'll give you, and there's been a real life example in 2020, just a couple of years ago. There was a fatal crash around Mount Dore, and it was exactly that situation. Two vehicles heading in opposite directions, and both of them on the middle lane. And this would have happened around 7:30, maybe 8 o'clock at night. And both of them thought they had the right of way, and they crashed head on, right? One of the drivers died in the crash. It's important for us to start paying attention to these signs. Yeah, it's important to pay attention to these signs. These signs give us information. It doesn't matter where you are in Trinidad or Tobago, there are always some special traffic arrangements somewhere. We know around UE in St. Augustine, right? There are lots of areas that are one way between certain hours. Yeah, Tunapuna on the Eastern Main Road is westbound traffic only from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Port of Spain, Mucurapo Road, that entrance onto the foreshore is no entry between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. Monday to Friday. And it doesn't matter where you go in Trinidad and Tobago, there are lots of different traffic arrangements that we need to be mindful of. Now, don't get me wrong, I'll be the first one to send an email or to make a call to Ministry of Roads and Transport if there aren't signs. But in these places, the signs do exist. They are there, but we just don't see it. So it's crucial that we as drivers pay attention to these signs. Look out for them. Yeah? What about these signs? Traffic lights, traffic signals. We would have all learned red means stop. And we would have all learned green means go. But how many of us have learned that amber means stop as well? A lot of us would have learned amber means slow down. I want us to recondition our minds so that when we see amber, we stop. Amber means stop. We may have seen videos. There's been a lot of videos circulating, I think earlier this year, last year maybe, along the priority bus routes in the vicinity of Makoya, right? And there's news headlines that spoke about a Jumbie corner, right? And the corner was cursed. Nah, it's not that, It was simply people rushing the traffic lights. That particular traffic light takes a long time to change if you're heading either north or south along that road. People would be coming down, they see the amber light, and instead of slowing down, as they would have learned, they sped up. The problem is you can't see what's happening on the priority bus route because it's a kind of a blind corner. So they mash gas and they speed up and collision. Yeah, wherever we see the amber, it means stop. I need us to understand that. When you see the amber, it means you need to be on your brakes. Now, if the light changes when you've already crossed into the intersection, by all means, you may proceed with caution. You may proceed with caution. Otherwise, where you see that amber light, you need to be on your brakes. Step on the brakes. Amber means stop. Right? For the new drivers, I know some of us may be getting some angry gestures and angry comments from other drivers who think you're driving too slow. But you know what you will find? A lot of times you're driving, they think you're driving too slow, but you'll end up at the same traffic light. Right? In Trinidad and Tobago, is a small twin island state, speeding really doesn't make any sense. Right? We think that we're gaining a whole bunch of time when in truth and in fact we are not. As a matter of fact, not only are we not gaining a lot of time by speeding, but we are increasing our risk of getting into a crash, and we're increasing our risk for injury and increasing our risk for death as a result of a traffic collision. According to the data that we've gotten from the TTPS, it shows where speeding has accounted as a main contributing factor in 55% of all crashes. 55%. Yeah, just imagine that. Now, this video actually reminds me of a situation that we would have had to deal with at Arrival Live. A family of four, mother, father, and two young boys went to visit a family member who lives not too far away. And when they left the relative's house, they were on their way back home. And this is a route that they have walked hundreds of times before. On their way home, a reckless driver crashes into the family. The force of the impact was enough to kill both parents. So just imagine that those two boys, at the time of the crash, they were both 6 and 8 years old respectively. Those two boys literally saw their parents die in front of them. Yeah, just imagine that those two boys literally saw their parents die in front of them. Why? Because somebody was late or somebody was in a rush. So what makes speed so dangerous? First things first, when it comes to speed, the higher the speed, the higher the likelihood you'll get into a crash. Or the faster you drive, the higher the chance of you getting into a crash. And the logic for that is real simple. If I want my car to go faster, all I need to do is step on the accelerator pedal, right? Step on the gas. If I find my car is still not going fast enough, there are things that I can do to make my car faster, right? I can get a new engine, I can put in a turbo. Quite frankly, if I wanted to and I had an unlimited budget, I could slap a rocket to the back of my car and make it go even faster. The problem with that is I still need to control that vehicle. I still need to maneuver that vehicle. Me, a human being, still needs to maneuver that vehicle to keep it under control. How can I make my reflexes faster? How do I make my reaction times faster? Right? It is close to impossible. And I say close because we've seen people do it, right? Usain Bolt is the fastest man in the world. He was able to reduce his start time, but it took him half his life to reduce his start time by a fraction of a second. So it's extremely difficult to do. Meanwhile, my car is going much faster than I can react. As my car gets faster, that gap between my reaction speed and the speed of the vehicle begins to get wider and wider and wider. In other words, it makes it more difficult for me to control that vehicle. Think about what we hear in the news, what we hear from police reports. A very common description you hear in car crashes is the driver lost control of the vehicle. Personally, I don't like that turn of phrase. I don't like to hear that a driver lost control of the vehicle. Because in my mind, every time I hear that, I think, no, the driver was unable to control the vehicle. Yeah, the driver was unable to control the vehicle. He didn't just sporadically, magically lose control of the vehicle, right? He was unable to control the vehicle, right? And in some instances, in a lot of instances, it's because the vehicle was going too fast. Another danger when it comes to speed is the impact. The faster you drive, the more severe the impact will be in the event of a crash. Yeah, the higher the speed, the more severe the impact will be in the event of a crash. So this, I actually pulled from an Australian study. And what they did, they took a regular size sedan and they measured the impact force at different speeds. And what they found was that at that vehicle traveling at 30 kilometers per hour, this is a regular sedan, the impact force that was generated was enough to cause or result in a 10% chance in killing a pedestrian. When that same vehicle, they measured the impact force at 60 kilometers per hour, they found that the force was enough to generate a 95% chance of killing a pedestrian. 95%. Yeah, more cases than not, if a pedestrian is hit at 60 kilometers per hour, they will die. Consider how fast we drive on our main roads. The legal limit is 50 kilometers per hour. Whenever there's no traffic on the main roads, how fast do people drive? And the last danger when it comes to speed is the faster you drive, the longer it takes the vehicle to stop. The faster you drive, the longer it takes the vehicle to stop. Or the higher the speed, the longer it takes to stop the vehicle. Now, I like to break this down a little bit. When we have to consider what it takes to stop a vehicle, we have to consider first your perception. Well, you know what? Let me take it from the other direction. Let's first consider your braking. Right? When you step on the brakes, the car doesn't just stop. The car decelerates. It slows down until it comes to a complete stop. Before you step on the brakes, you have to react. Right? Your reaction is that signal that leaves the brain and travels down the foot for you to step on the brakes. And that reaction happens in a split second. But before you can react, the first thing that must happen is you must first perceive the hazard. You have to first see and recognize. So you see that hazard and your brain processes that information before you make a decision. Yeah, that perception is key. Now below there, you will see I have perception distance, reaction distance, and braking distance that give you your total stopping distance. Yeah, your total stopping distance is the entire distance that the vehicle travels between the time you see the hazard and when the vehicle comes to a complete stop. Because we have to recognize that while this is happening, the car doesn't stop. So the time that it takes me to see and recognize a child running across the road, my brain has to, my eyes first see, send a signal to my brain. My brain then processes that information to come up with a course of action. And even though that takes fractions of a second, my vehicle is still traveling in that fraction of a second. Once my brain decides what the course of action is, my brain sends a signal to my foot to step on the brakes. Now, it's said that an average human reaction is about 1/100th of a second. 1/100th of a second. in that 1/100th of a second, the vehicle is still traveling. The vehicle is still covering distance. And then once I apply the brakes, the car does not just stop, the car decelerates. So the car is still traveling while it's slowing down. Yeah, so when I add perception distance, the reaction distance, the braking distance, it gives me my total stopping distance. So let's put this in a real life scenario. I'm driving, let's say for argument's sake, I'm driving down the highway and I've just passed Trin City traffic lights and I'm heading east. But of course, I got the amber light and I didn't hit the brakes. I hit the gas when I saw the amber light because I didn't want to catch that red light. So I'm driving just above the speed limit. I'm driving at 112 kilometers per hour. Right? So I'm looking at this on the chart, I'm looking at the red car to the bottom. At 112 kilometers per hour. A little old lady is attempting to cross the highway because, arthritis acting up. She can't walk up the staircase to use the walkover. So she's crossing right underneath the walkover. And the time that it takes me to see and recognize, my brain to process, to determine a course of action, my vehicle will travel 55 meters. And the time that it takes my brain to send a signal to my foot to step on the brakes, my vehicle travels 23 meters. And once I apply the brakes, the vehicle travels for another 71 meters before it comes to a complete stop, for a total stopping distance of 149 meters. So to put that in perspective, how long is 149 meters? To put that in perspective, a regulation size football field is between 100 to 120 meters. So we're talking about longer than the length of a football field. That's how long it takes me to stop. And this is under ideal conditions. So what happened? What would have been the situation if it was nighttime? I couldn't see as far. What if rain was falling? What if it's dry season and there's a bushfire, so smoke has blown across the road? What does that mean for my perception? Right? It'll take me a longer time to see. What if I was not wearing my glasses? It'll take me a longer time to see. So my perception distance might be longer. What about if I was under the influence of alcohol or drugs? And when I say drugs, drugs does not only mean illicit drugs, but maybe I had 2 Panadol, right? And it did not agree with me well. That can affect my reaction speed. If I'm sleepy, that affects my reaction speed. What about the braking distance? If my tires are smooth, remember we spoke about that earlier. Checking your vehicle, checking the rubber, right? What about if rain is falling? The road is wet. What about if my brakes aren't working properly? What does that mean for my braking distance? It all extends. Yeah? So we have to regulate our speed not only based on the external environment, but also in terms of what we know is going on with our vehicles, what is going on with us as individuals. Always remember, as drivers, the only thing that you can control is yourself. You can't control anything else but yourself. Nice. So another question, another prize. What are the 3 things you need to consider when bringing a vehicle to a complete stop? What are the 3 things you need to consider when bringing a vehicle to a complete stop? Again, put your answers in the chat. Is it A, perception distance, reaction distance, and braking distance? Is it B, looking distance, response time, and pedestrians? Is it C, other drivers, pedestrians, and the engine size of the vehicle? Or is it D, none of the above? What are 3 things you need to consider when bringing a vehicle to a complete stop? Right? Put your answers in the chat. Let's see who wins prizes today. Right? I know this one was an easy one. The answer is A, perception distance, reaction distance, and braking distance. Whenever we're considering or whenever we have to think about stopping the vehicle, those 3 things always come into play, right? As much as we're talking about speed, are we aware of the speed limits? Right? I'm sure we all know 100 kilometers per hour is the speed limit on the highway. And if you didn't know before, you would have heard me mention it before. The speed limit along the main roads is 50 kilometers per hour. Now, how it's written in the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act is written as the speed limit within a built-up area, right? So the Eastern Main Road, Western Main Road, Southern Main Roads, right? They all are 50 kilometers per hour. Sometimes we see 30 kilometers per hour speed limits, right? Usually those are in areas where there's heavy pedestrian traffic and high risk traffic at that. So around schools and hospitals, you tend to find 30 kilometers per hour. Sometimes you see a 30 kilometer per hour sign around a recreational park, or sometimes you see them in residential areas, right? But those are not the only speed limits, right? There are other speed limits as well. 65 kilometers per hour, 80 kilometers per hour are examples. As drivers, we have to look out for these signs. I am 100%, no, that's 100% is him. I am very sure that if I were to ask you, where's the closest speed limit sign to you right now, you'd be hard pressed to answer, right? It's just a habit that we pick up as drivers. We stop paying attention to these signs. All road signs give us information. We have to remember to look out for these signs. You would notice over the last decade or so, there are a lot of interchanges being built. If you pay attention around those interchanges, you will see there are different speed limits set. Those speed limits are there as a guide to help you navigate those interchanges safely. So if you're approaching the interchange by Grand Bazaar, there are certain areas where it slows down to as slow as 60 or 40 kilometers per hour, depending on what direction you're heading. Kirep interchange is the same thing. When you're going to crossing in San Fernando, that interchange, you slow down to 40 kilometers per hour to enter the interchange. It helps you navigate that interchange properly. If you do not obey this posted speed limit, it means that you can get a ticket. And in case you didn't know, the TTPS has been out in full force enforcing speed regulations in particular. Remember what I just showed you on that chart? 55%, right? Speeding accounted as a main contributing factor in 55% of all fatal crashes. So it is one of the things that TTPS targets. The law has changed though. So now it's not just one ticket for speeding. Your ticket and the fixed penalty or the fine or the ticket that you'd have to pay is determined by the speed that you're exceeding the speed limit by. So if you exceed it by 1 to 9 kilometers per hour, you have $1,000 ticket, but you don't have any demerit points applied to it. And it increases gradually to the highest point being if you exceed the speed limit by 31 kilometers or more above the speed limit, you're facing a fixed penalty or a traffic ticket of $3,000 plus 6 demerit points. So if the faster you drive, the longer it takes your vehicle to stop. The faster you drive, the higher the likelihood you'll get into a crash. And the faster you drive, the more severe that impact will be in the event of a crash. So because of those three things, the faster you drive, the higher the penalty will be. On top of that, like the video showed you earlier, the video I've shown you before, it doesn't really save a lot of time. So what we did here is we measured the distance from Port of Spain to these areas, Sandy Grande, San Fernando, Arima, Chaguanas, and Tunapuna. And we calculated based on the distance, the time that it will take us to get there if we're traveling at 100 kilometers per hour and if we're traveling at 120 kilometers per hour. And what we found is that the difference in time was negligible. Imagine from Port of Spain to Tunapuna at 100 kilometers per hour, it takes me 10.8 minutes. But if I'm driving at 120 kilometers per hour, it takes me 9 minutes. The difference is less than 2 minutes. Less than 2 minutes. But as I increase my speed, I increase my risk. Is the risk worth the reward? I like to use the San Fernando example a lot because I do business in San Fernando quite often. And especially if I have to go to San Fernando on the weekend, when I tell people that I leave, when I pass Central Market, right? I pass C-Lots. Once I pass that traffic light, it takes me about 30 to 35 minutes to get to San Fernando. I am always told that I am speeding. There's no way I could be driving below the speed limit. And I drive between around 90 kilometers per hour generally, right? I don't ever get to 100. And I take between 30 to 35 minutes to get to San Fernando. No exaggeration. Yeah, and it's something I do on a regular basis. So in terms of real time, yeah, it doesn't take that long. What takes us a lot of time in Trinidad and Tobago is traffic. And sometimes we get excited when we get out of the traffic and we just need to free up. We need to step on that gas and make up the time we lost in traffic. In reality, you are actually not making up as much time as you think you are. All you're doing is putting yourself at risk. Not only yourself, but the other road users around you as well. Now I'm going back and forth a little bit because all these different things kind of work together. So I couldn't talk about seatbelts when I spoke about vehicles and knowing your vehicle without first talking about speed, right? Because what these seatbelts do, it helps decelerate your body. It slows your body down in the event of a crash so that there isn't a severe impact. Now, in Trinidad and Tobago, the law says the driver and front seat occupants must wear a seatbelt. So if you did not know as a driver, if your front seat passenger is not wearing their seatbelt, you as a driver can still get a ticket. You as a driver can still get a ticket. And it's $1,000 ticket plus 4 demerit points added to your record. Yeah, so make it your business. Make sure whoever's in your car, make sure that they're wearing the seatbelts. On top of that, we don't have any law for wearing seatbelts in the back seat. But think about it. If the seatbelt in the front slows my body down from hitting the other objects in the vehicle, and it keeps me in place in the vehicle in the event of a crash, shouldn't it do the same thing for people in the back seat too? Think about it.
Body to body, funky to funky, we know how to rock your body.
This is Michael. Today he's going to hit his girlfriend so hard she ends up with permanent brain damage.
Funky to funky, your body. You never get another man like you. One more ever with a man like you.
Every day in this vehicle, girl is critical. They say the guy without the seatbelt did the damage.
No seatbelt, no excuse.
So in other words, if the occupants in the back seat are not wearing their seatbelts, there's nothing holding them in place in the event of a crash. That occupant now becomes a projectile. That occupant now becomes a projectile. So even though I have on my seatbelt in the front seat, because I'm being safe, the front seat occupant has on their seatbelt because I don't want to get a ticket. The person in the back seat who's not wearing their seatbelt can still crash into me, crash into the other occupants of the vehicle. Just imagine if the vehicle is traveling at 100 kilometers per hour, then it means that the occupants of the vehicle are also traveling at 100 kilometers per hour. When that vehicle crashes, they are still traveling at 100 kilometers per hour. So just imagine someone headbutting you at 100 kilometers per hour. What about a shoulder hitting you at 100 kilometers per hour? An elbow, a hip, a knee at 100 kilometers per hour. Now, I know I'm sounding very extreme, but we've seen it happen time and time and time again in Trinidad and Tobago. Quite frankly, this video is the reason that I make it my business. As a driver, I'm responsible for everything that happens in my vehicle. So when I get into my car, if anyone else gets into my car, they must wear their seatbelt, whether they're in the front seat or the back seat. That is my rule. I don't need to wait for the law to tell me what is the safe thing to do. Yeah, and I'm not gonna, paint a picture that's all sunshine and rainbows. It was difficult when I first started doing it. I had many friends, family even, who would give me a whole bunch of old talk. They're not putting on the seatbelt. It have no laws for that. Why I must wear the seatbelt? I put my foot down. It's real simple. It's either you put on the seatbelt or we don't go anywhere. I'm in control of the vehicle. I determine when the vehicle drives or it's stationary. I'm in control, not the person in the back seat. And very begrudgingly, they put on their seatbelt. And those who did not put on their seatbelt, well, there are alternative forms of transportation. They could always take a maxi on the bus route. But those who put on their seatbelt in the backseat, even now they get into a taxi and they put on their seatbelt. Yeah, it's up to us to make that change. Make that change. Decide to make that change for yourself. Decide to be in control of your vehicle. Question time. Why is it important for all passengers to wear seatbelts, even in the back seat? I inadvertently gave you all the answer very quickly there. But let's see who can give us the answer in the chat. Why is it important for all passengers to wear seatbelts even in the back seat? I should see everybody answering these questions. Is it A, the driver can get a ticket? Is it B, the backseat passenger can get a ticket? Is it C, in a crash they can injure or kill themselves and others? Or is it D, all of the above? The answer is C. In a crash, they can injure or kill themselves and others. Now, I've come back to this chart again. And I've come back to this chart again because I want us to talk about alcohol. Right? According to data from TTPS, alcohol has been present as a main contributing factor in 30% of all fatal crashes in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, I think it's important for us to acknowledge first and foremost that alcohol has played a significant role in our history, in the Caribbean and in Trinidad and Tobago in particular, right? So much so that it is almost ingrained in our culture. Yeah, I mean, Arrival Live's office is located in Fernandez compound. Right next door, there's Angostura. Right outside, especially when you go to rural communities, you always find the busiest bar is the one closest to the church, right? Or closest to the cemetery. It's a big part of our culture. And at Arrival Live, we are not telling people not to drink alcohol. That is your choice that you have to make for yourself. What we are saying is that alcohol and driving do not mix. The two should not mix at all. And I'll get into why now. Let's first understand what alcohol is when we talk about alcohol, right? So the type of alcohol we're talking about is ethanol or ethyl alcohol, right? That's the primary ingredient in our favorite alcoholic beverages, right? By nature, it's clear, it's volatile, meaning that it burns very easily and is soluble in water. But most importantly, we need to look at how alcohol affects us, right? Alcohol is a central nervous system depressant. Alcohol is a central nervous system depressant. So what does that mean?
Sorry to interrupt you. One minute. We just have that poll up on the screen. So we invite participants to quickly give their answers. And I'm sorry, Jerome, you can jump back in after, guys. We want to hear your thoughts. How can you lower your blood alcohol concentration? Is it by water, coffee, soda, or time?
You've heard a lot of these things, right? Water, coffee, soda, or time. One of these things helps lower your blood alcohol concentration. Right, so I'm going to go ahead, just in the interest of time, as feel free if you haven't selected an answer yet, you just think about it a little bit to just have. Oh, you corrected it already. Okay, nice. Right, so yes, so the correct answer is time. Time is the only way that you can lower your blood alcohol concentration. It just takes time for your blood, for the alcohol to work its way out of your bloodstream, and I'll explain that in a second. So, alcohol is a central nervous system depressant. Think about what your central nervous system does. What is your central nervous system? Your central nervous system is that collection of nerves that runs throughout your entire body. Yeah, it runs throughout your entire body. The central nervous system sends signals to and from the brain. When you have alcohol in your system, those signals slow down. So think about what you would see if a friend may have been drunk. Think about some of the behaviors that you observe. Yeah? You might notice someone who's drunk might be staggering or they're drifting. You might notice they have slurred speech. Yeah? They may stretch to pick up a bottle and they throw down the bottle instead of picking it up. All those things are as a result of that alcohol being affecting your central nervous system. Yeah? Alcohol would affect things like depth perception and peripheral vision. Depth perception tells you how close or how far something is away from you. Peripheral vision helps you perceive motion on either side of your body, just outside your field of vision. Don't we use depth perception and peripheral vision when driving? We use depth perception to tell you whether the car in front of you is speeding up or slowing down. Use peripheral vision when you're checking your mirrors, your side mirrors, your rearview mirror. Right? I may be looking straight ahead, but I will notice a car coming up on my right or a car coming up on my left because I notice it through my peripheral vision in my mirrors. Alcohol affects your reflexes and reaction times, your gross motor skills. So that complex movement, right? Recognize that walking is a complex movement. That's why someone who is intoxicated may stagger while they're walking, right? The signals going to and from the brain, from the brain to the muscles are all slightly delayed. So what does that mean? What does that mean for us as human beings? When we have alcohol in our system, our central nervous system slows down. Eventually, as the alcohol enters our system, the alcohol enters the bloodstream, and the bloodstream passes through the liver, and the liver works the alcohol out of your system. There are enzymes within your liver that break down that alcohol. That's why the only thing that helps you helps you reduce your alcohol concentration is time, because it takes time for your liver to eliminate all that alcohol, right? Drinking water may make you feel better, but it actually does not help reduce your alcohol concentration. Quite frankly, coffee doesn't help. Sodas actually don't help. Both sodas and coffee are diuretics. They help push water out of your system, right? Which is the exact opposite of what you need, right? Because the alcohol will dehydrate you. Now, according to the law, we actually have 5 breathalyzer offenses. So there are 5 breathalyzer offenses in Trinidad and Tobago. Most people are only familiar with one. And that one is driving a vehicle with a breath alcohol level in excess of the prescribed limit. So the example I like to use, I went out drinking. On my way home, police stopped me in a roadblock. They do a breathalyzer test and my reading is above the legal limit. The legal limit in Trinidad and Tobago is 35 micrograms per 100 milliliters of breath. In that instance, I'll be charged with driving a vehicle with a breath alcohol level in excess of the prescribed limit. The second one, which is one that most people are not aware of, is attempting to drive with a breath alcohol level in excess of the prescribed limit. Same situation. But before I get to my car, maybe a police officer observes me staggering as I'm crossing the road to get to my car. But for whatever reason, they ask me to submit a breathalyzer test, even though I have not opened my car as yet. Even though I haven't jumped in behind the wheel and started the car. Officer has enough reasonable suspicion to ask me to submit a breathalyzer test. And if I do, I may be charged with attempting to drive with a breath alcohol level in excess of the prescribed limit. The third one, being in charge of a motor vehicle with a breath alcohol level in excess of the prescribed limit. So something that I see people do quite often in Trinidad and Tobago. They go out, they have a few drinks, they realize they've drank too much, so they decide they're going to sleep it off in the car. If police come, knocks on your door and ask you to submit a breathalyzer test, even if you're in the back seat with the keys in your pocket, and your reading is in excess of 35 micrograms per 100 milliliters of breath, you may be charged with being in charge of a motor vehicle with a breath alcohol level in excess of the prescribed limit. The next one is failure refusal to provide a breath specimen. Back in 2010, I believe, there was a government minister who refused to do a breathalyzer test. He was subsequently charged with failure or refusal to provide a breath specimen. If a police officer asks you to submit a breathalyzer test, it is a lawful request. And lastly, altering the concentration of alcohol in your breath. One of the things that Arrive Life does as part of our drive towards education is we would do sober zones or set up breathalyzer testing at events, not to arrest anyone, but to educate the public, right? So we'd encourage people, have a drink, wait a couple minutes, come and do a breathalyzer test, and you'll see how your body is reacting to the alcohol. And one of the things that we get is people think that they can beat the breathalyzer. You cannot beat the breathalyzer. The breathalyzer only recognizes alcohol. If you put anything in your mouth, brown paper, charcoal, aluminum foil, what else have I heard? I've heard people put a 5-cent piece under their tongue. I've heard somebody talk about peanut butter. Those things, none of those things work. By putting those things in your mouth, you are attempting to pervert the course of justice. You are committing fraud. And as such, you will be charged for attempting to alter the concentration of alcohol in your breath. This charge is also a criminal charge. It is not a ticketable offense. So if you are arrested, yes, arrested, you have to go before the magistrate. And the magistrate will determine what your fixed penalty will be. Right? The magistrate will determine your fine. However, once you are found guilty, these points will be applied. So for driving, being in charge of, or attempting to drive a vehicle with a breath alcohol level in excess of the prescribed limit, you're facing 9 demerit points. If you fail or refuse to provide a breath specimen, you're facing 14 demerit points upon conviction. And if you willfully attempt to alter the concentration of alcohol in your breath or blood, you're also facing 14 demerit points upon conviction. Yeah, upon conviction. And again, you're going before the magistrate, and these are the guidelines for the magistrate. On your first offense, you're facing up to $12,000, a $12,000 fine, or 3 years imprisonment. On your second offense, you're facing up to $22,500 or 5 years imprisonment. And on your third offense, because yes, there are people who commit the offense a third time, you're facing jail time, incarceration, plus the dismissal of your permit. Keep in mind that because you're going before the magistrate does have the authority to assign additional penalties. I have seen people get on their first offense, no fine at all, but they had 200 hours community service to do. I have seen people who've been imprisoned on their third offense. I've seen the magistrate take people's driver's permit from a first offense. The magistrate has the authority to do that. Right? Long story short, don't put yourself in that position. Designate a sober driver, call a friend, get a parent to drop you, hire a driver. Right? We living in 2023. We have plenty options. Don't put yourself in that situation. Right? Designate a sober driver. Now, I started to touch on the merit points, so I'll get into it very quickly. I think I'm over my time already. So we have in Trinidad and Tobago now the demerit point system. The demerit point system took effect on May the 26th, 2020. On that day, every single legitimate driver in Trinidad and Tobago started with 0 points on their record. Anyone who has access to your driver's permit can check your driving permit record. And they can use this website here, apps.mowt.gov.tt. Right? Anyone who has access to a driver's permit can check your permit information there. They can see what your record says. I understand that insurance companies have started using it. So before they renew a client, before they renew that insurance, they are checking the driver's permits to see if the person has any demerit points, or in other words, they're checking to see if that person is high risk. So someone who has a breathalyzer offense recorded on their record, or someone who has speeding offenses recorded on their record, they may be higher risk. Yeah. Basically, as drivers commit offenses, points are added to their records. When you get to the maximum threshold of demerit points, a permit may be disqualified for a specified period of time. Right? It will never be indefinitely. It will always be for a specified period of time. If, however, you accumulate points, but you don't get to the threshold, if you go 2 years without accumulating any more points, those demerit points will be removed from your record. So, for example, if I get 4 points for not wearing my seatbelt today, yeah, today is the 26th of September. In 2 years' time, if I don't get any more points, those 4 points will automatically fall off of my record on the 26th of September, 2025. Now, I know that sounds like a long time, but in truth and in fact, most of us as drivers do not get tickets very often. Now, those points will be added to your record when one of these 3 things happens. When the payment is made or the fixed penalty. So once you pay that ticket, it is an admission of guilt. Those points are added to your record automatically. The second way is by conviction before the court. So you can have a conviction either from a criminal offense, such as a breathalyzer offense, or if you contest that ticket and the magistrate has to make a determination. And thirdly, is if you fail to pay the fixed penalty, because we're always looking for a loophole. If you don't pay the fixed penalty, you don't pay the ticket within the specified time frame, the points will be added automatically. Now, in Trinidad and Tobago, with this demerit point system, the law actually categorizes new drivers and experienced driver. A new driver is categorized as someone who's had their permit for a period of 12 months or less, or 1 year or less. For new drivers, your threshold is 7 points. If you accumulate 7 or more points within 12 months, your permit is disqualified for 1 year. For experienced drivers, though, there's a graduated system, right? Where the more points you accumulate, the longer the period of disqualification will be. So it goes from 6 months, 1 year, to 2 years as the maximum. People always ask me, how does someone accumulate 20 or more points? That is crazy, right? How can someone accumulate 20 or more points? And more times than not, it's usually as a result of something called simultaneous traffic violations. So the idea is, it's pretty easy for someone to get stopped by the police and be issued more than 1 ticket. So the example I have here, I was driving down the road. I wasn't wearing my seatbelt, right? I had too many people in my car, and I was exceeding the speed limit. I get caught in the speed trap. When the police pull me aside, they see me fighting to put on my seatbelt before they get to my door. When the police officer comes to ask me for my driver's permit and insurance, he sees 6 people in the backseat of my car. So automatically, one time, police officer giving me 3 tickets. Right? Altogether, the total penalty would be $3,500 worth of tickets, or $3,500 worth of fines. The law says, if in a situation like this, if I pay all 3 tickets within the specified time frame, only the offense that carries the largest number of demerit points will be added to my record. So in this instance, if I pay all $3,500, only 4 points will be added to my record. If, however, I pay 2 tickets and I don't pay the 3rd one, or I pay 1 ticket and I don't pay the other 2, or I just don't pay any tickets at all the points will be added to my record. So instead of getting just 4 points, I'll now be getting 9 points added to my record. There is one exception, and that is if you're caught breaking a red light and exceeding the speed limit. In such instances, the demerit points for those offenses will be recorded on your record, as well as any other offenses committed at the same time. Yeah? And again, if we look at it, we're looking at the risk. Consider the risk involved if someone is speeding and breaking a red light. Right? Another way is through double demerit points, and you would have heard about double demerit points in the media before. It is a real thing. It does exist within the law, but there are special circumstances that must fall into place. The minister must issue that order. The order must be published in the Gazette and at least one daily newspaper, and must be published at least 5 days before the start of the period. And that period will not exceed 10 consecutive days. And when the minister issues such an order, it means that for those violations listed, you will have twice the number of demerit points assigned. So if we have Christmas coming up, let's say the minister decides he wants to have double demerit points on all breathalyzer offenses, it means that if I'm caught and charged with a breathalyzer offense within that period, I'm not facing 9 points, I'll be facing 18 points from one violation. Again, it's nothing, I don't want anybody to get scared about that. The regulations are clear, it must be posted, so the general populace will have enough notice of such offenses. Secondly, I'm not worried because you're not going to commit any offenses that will result in you getting any points anyway, right? I just want to go through this real quickly too, the demerit point system and the U-turn system and how it works. So now with the new system, you have 30 days to pay the ticket. The ticket is now all electronic. Once that police officer issues that ticket, he cannot undo it. He can't say, oops, I've made a mistake. The only way out is to file a notice to contest. Again, it's not like before where you would have had to appear before the court on a specific date. You have to file a notice to contest, and you use this website, contest.ttlawcourts.org, to file that notice to contest. If you do not file that notice to contest, you have to pay the ticket within 30-day period. If you don't pay it within 30 days, the law gives you an additional 14 days to pay the ticket, plus an escalated fine of 25%. So if my ticket was initially $1,000, I now have to pay $1,000 plus 25%, that's $1,250. If I don't pay all of that in that additional 14 days, the law gives me another 14 days to pay the fine plus an additional 25%. So now I have to pay 150%. So a total of $1,500. So the law gives me 30 plus 14 plus 14, 58 days to pay any tickets plus escalations. If you do not pay your tickets, it's not like before where you would have had a summons and a bench warrant being issued, because this is not going to the court unless you file a notice to contest. Licensing authority has the authority and the ability to impose something called administrative sanctions. So what that means is they can say, John, we are not going to do any business with you in licensing office. And the thing is, as drivers, the one thing we cannot avoid is going into licensing office. We simply can't avoid it. If I have to do a renewal or transfer a vehicle or do an endorsement, I have to go into licensing office. Right? So this is just a few of the different offenses and the points that will be assigned. We looked at speed a little while ago. We see that the number of demerit points increases, the penalties increases as the speed increases. The speed increases, as the speed increases, our risk also increases. Right? Use of electronic devices, cell phones, right? You're facing a $1,000 ticket plus 3 demerit points across the board. For seat belts, 4 points across the board. So if you as a driver are not wearing your seatbelt, you're facing 4 points. If your front seat passengers are not wearing their seatbelts, you're facing 4 points as well. Right? We looked at the breathalyzer offenses as well, 9 and 14 points respectively. All right. Now I went over my time significantly, but do we have any questions?
Yes, I believe I saw a question in the chat.
I'm going through the chat.
Yes, sure. So we have two questions Rihanna would have put for you. The first one is, has Arrived requested of the Ministry of Works and Transport to add to regulations the booklet info about roundabouts? That's the first one.
Short answer, yes. I know that there is some work being done in the background, and there are some efforts in the pipeline to make some changes to regulations on the whole. I know one of the things that they were talking about was even computerizing the regulations test.
Yes, thanks, Jerome. And the second question also from Rihanna is, what about crosswinds? People blame crosswinds for accidents. What is your viewpoint on that?
My viewpoint is two things. One, crosswinds are most dangerous when vehicles are traveling at high speeds. That's one. Two, the areas in Trinidad, especially along the highways where you have very strong crosswinds, there are signs. There are signs. Claxon Bay, there are many signs. In the back of Piarco, by the airport, there are many signs. There's even a sign, a crosswind sign on the highway between Orange Grove lights and Trin City lights. There's a crosswind sign there, right? So there are signs. Are we paying attention to these signs as drivers?
Thanks, Jerome. And Rihanna, you have a question. What is 4 points and $1,000? But I'm not quite sure what you're alluding to. Is it specific offense?
I myself have a question concerning the ticketing. Can someone receive a ticket via the mail?
So there is legislation in place for spot speed cameras, a spot speed camera system, as well as red light traffic enforcement camera systems. But as far as I understand, it is not operational. So right now, no. Short answer is no. But it is coming. It is coming.
Because I've seen some posts about it now, so I wanted to
Yeah.
confirm.
I saw posts about it as well. As far as I can tell, it seems to be some mischief. But yeah, the legislation is in place. It is coming. What I will say as well is when it is operational, I know persons are sometimes concerned when someone else is driving their vehicle and they get their ticket. Those types of tickets within that system will not have any demerit points applied. The ticket will simply go to the registered owner of the vehicle. The ticket would also have the date, time, and a picture. So it's up to you as the owner of the vehicle to recoup any funds for the payment of that ticket from the person who's driving the vehicle at this point in time.
I understand. I believe you have another question by Rihanna.
Okay, what I was just trying to confirm is it that, so it's 4 points you're going to get for the person's not wearing their seatbelts, you as a driver, and to them, you're going to be charged $1,000, all of that.
So also you're asking if it's 4
Yeah,
points
I want to
and
know if
a
it's for
thousand,
free. Yeah,
or
this
4
is
points or $1,000?
4 and
Yeah, it's 4 points and $1,000.
for people not counting the various people.
Yep, that's correct.
That's on, yeah, boy. Okay, thank you.
Right, so see, Kino's
Kino has
asking.
a question as well.
I'm
Can
seeing
you
it.
be charged for committing a speeding offense if escaping danger, for example, being chased or let's say rushing to the hospital? Good question, Kino.
All right, so that is up to the discretion of the individual police officer. So I know of instances where people said they were rushing to the hospital, but they were still issued a ticket. I know of instances where the police made a discretionary call and they actually escorted people to the hospital. So it really does come down to the discretion of the individual officer. What I would say, depending on the nature of your situation, because you need to have a very solid case, you also always have the option of contesting the ticket. So if you can prove without reasonable doubt that you were genuinely in danger, or you were being chased, or you were rushing to the hospital, you have the opportunity to contest that ticket. So you'll have your day in court.
Okay, and we also have one last poll. I'm not sure if it was, no, I don't think it was done as yet. We have one last poll as a quick review to the not DUI, sorry, the demerit point system section.
What is the threshold of points for disqualification of new drivers? What is the threshold of points for disqualification of new drivers? Right, so the correct answer is 7 points. For new drivers, if you accumulate 7 or more points within that first year, your permit may be disqualified for an entire year. Yeah, it may be disqualified for an entire year. All right. Any other questions? No? All right, so just before I leave you all, I just want to share that we do have opportunities for volunteers within Arrive Alive. We do training internally, so you have the availability to develop soft skills. You have the opportunity to contribute to the overall reduction in deaths and serious injuries through education, through advocacy, and through support of the road traffic victims themselves and their loved ones. Is something that we tend to forget about a lot in Trinidad and Tobago. We hear about the crash, we feel sorry for that mother who you see crying on the news, and a week later we forget all about them. You know, so we as an road safety advocate is one of the things that we do work really hard at to try and offer support for these families. Just few images from some of the different events that we would have done. road safety booths, presentations at schools. We had road safety awards earlier this year, recognizing the first responders, right? Who actually are on site and see these crashes and see the aftermath of these crashes. Yeah, a few of the families that we lend assistance to. And if you are interested, you can send us an email at contact@arrivalivett.com, and we'll give you all the details in terms of how to become a volunteer with Arrive Alive.
We can't
Yeah.
thank you guys enough, for taking any time out of your schedules to be here. This session was power packed. I mean, I learned a lot, even though I'm not entirely a new driver. And I'm sure the other attendees can attest to the same. So guys, if you can take a few minutes to complete our evaluation, your feedback is extremely important to us, and it would, aid in us creating more sessions similar to this. And
And
also,
also, while
Jerome,
you guys do that, dropping in the chat the winners for the prizes today. So, guys, check out the chats.
drum roll.
Dropping that in the chat now.
Oh, Jerome, I believe a question would have coming down to the end.
Okay, I'm seeing it.
Yeah,
Tiffany asking about insurance costs.
that's correct.
If this course, it does not, as far as I know. I still recommend people do a defensive driving course, not only to lower your insurance cost, but there are some courses locally where they actually do a practical element of the defensive driving, where they would actually take you out onto the road, and do different exercises such as hazard perception. And those are recognized, and you will have a lower insurance cost. You can apply or discount it.
Also, let me put in a plug for our co-curricular courses. We actually offer a driving course, which I mean, it's a simulation course. So
Okay.
if anyone who is interested in being a student, you can also register for that co-curricular course.
All right. So I'm seeing some names going into the chat for prizes. Right, so I'm seeing Cassidy Adonis, Yakira Peters, Sadia Atkins, and Kino Nora all have prizes to collect. Esther, you'll let them know how to collect these prizes?
Sure, no problem. So, what we'd like is for everybody to drop a contact number to us privately in the chat, and we will contact you. And Jerome, do you have a picture of the prize, the t-shirt you want to share with them?
Not easily shareable right now.
All right, no problem.
Oh, I missed Rihanna. Rihanna got a prize as well. Rihanna Monsi.
I think you're breaking up a little bit, Jerome, if you are speaking.
So I'm just quickly sharing my screen so that you can see an idea of the prize. Yeah, so it's essentially a t-shirt that we have encouraging positive behavior by buckling up, right? So what I'd like for you guys to do is also give us your t-shirt size. And we have three colors. You have with the pink band, the blue band, and the red band. Let us know your preferred size, and we will organize for you.
And don't forget Esther's limited edition, right? Limited edition. Limited edition. There aren't many of these t-shirts out there. It's a limited edition.
And that pop of color, though, I love any pink.
Pink is a favorite.
Guys, again, this was a really exciting session, power pack, info pack. We can't thank you guys enough for attending and also for the presenters from Arrival Life, for imparting their knowledge upon us. It was good. I hope you all took a few minutes to complete the evaluation. And we are looking, most likely we'd have additional sessions similar to these. So be sure to tune in to us via email, also via our social media platforms. So thanks so much for joining, and I hope you all have an enjoyable afternoon.